Hello and welcome to Epic Battlecry. This is the place where we cut through the crap to bring the real deal on the gaming industry today. Today is, of course, Tuesday, August 18th, and I'm your host, Tony Grice, and with me, as always, Brent Adams, Daniel Kaiser.
Yes.
Hello.
Looks like Kaiser, sounds like Kaiser.
Yeah. That's how we always say. That's how you introduce yourself every time when you talk to somebody, isn't it?
It's
very awkward,
It's whenever I go somewhere, I'm like at a hotel or something, and they're like,
or you're in Germany or something.
Mr. Daniel, and then there's that curious look on their face, like, how do I say this? Do I say Kaiser? Do I say Kaiser? And I'm always like, I always say, looks like Kaiser, sounds like Kaiser. And they're like, oh,
why don't you just tell them it's like, you can just call me King.
Yeah. They're like, I know, I've got a TV, or I had a TV back when GTTV used to be a show.
I always get called, but people always call me my last name Grease.
Really?
And I'm like, how do you get Grease?
It's Grice.
From G-R-I-C-E. I'm like, literally the easiest way to pronounce it is how it's spelled.
It's like Smith.
But like, I just got back from L.A. and like the hotel I went to, like the very first place. I even said it to him. I was like, yeah, I have a thing under Tony Grice. And they're like, Tony, and looking at the paper, and I'm like, why don't you just say what I just said? No. Decide on your own what it looks like it's written. Grease? No, it's actually the thing I just said, Grice.
You know, it's weird. Although my name seems like relatively simple and relatively short, for some reason people are forever calling me Brent Smartmouth Shitbag.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Now,
admittedly,
out of all the things that makes the most sense.
It's usually when interacting with law enforcement type officials, but I don't know why they have problems with that though.
And they usually have guns drawn. It's really uncomfortable. Anyway, we've got a good question coming in to us from QRTs. Blonde. I'm just gonna call him Curtis Bland. I don't know if that sounds too bland, but
yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, like this is definitely an Hispanic name. I think we can all agree on that.
But at Curtis_Bland says at EpicBattleX, why don't we have full customization over the explicit content in games? Why not enable us to block, say, something like swears, violence, or sexual things in the game, etc.? So, Brent, you want to start us off with this one? Why don't we see more customization over that kind of content in the game?
Why would you want it? I guess is my first question. Why would you want to block those things?
I'm not Curtis. I can't answer that question.
I don't know. You know, it's
be courteous.
It's interesting. I'm sitting here like trying to think like why I would want to do this.
Well, I mean, what about for like people that use like those V boxes on like movies that want to take out swearing and sexual things? Yeah.
So you know. But,
yeah, but I don't know. I guess I have fundamentally different ideas about this. I mean, like, you know,
yeah, it does come down to fundamental ideas. Sure.
I just like I don't exactly understand like how human civilization has been made better by people like covering their ears anytime profanity is used.
Well, I don't think that's the
fucking
question.
Good point, Brent.
I think the question is more along the lines of like. But
I'm just I don't know, like I have like a kind of a fundamental disconnect with like the impetus for this. Like why would you want to like why would you want to go and like look at the Mona Lisa and say this painting would be so good if only, you know, I could like, you know, block out, well, you know, this like right side of her face, and then, you know, and then it would be it's art that I'm interested in consuming.
Yeah, and that's totally different. I mean, you're interpreting it as this is what the developers wanted to put in it. So anything that they put into it, you should subject yourself to, because you need to fully digest everything that they created in an effort to then evaluate and ultimately conclude what that experience was like for you. And that's that's exactly right when you're talking about certain things. But if EA decides that they want to make the game more authentic, and they decide that in Madden people should start swearing every once in a while, yet I want to play Madden with my sons and I don't want to hear an F-bomb dropped when they score a touchdown, from Curtis's perspective, which I do find it ironic that his last name is Bland, but I fully relate, because you know, if there is something, or sometimes you're playing a game and it is of one tone, it is of one mind, you know, like kind of mindset, and then something boom happens that might be a little bit extreme. The answer for me, like you said, most of the time is I have to be a little bit more selective. Like I'm not going to play game XYZ if there's a chance of stuff around my kids or whatever, just because I don't want to subject them at this early age to stuff like that, or I might play it later if I want to subject myself to it. That's my, whatever, it's my choosing. But there are points with these types of things, blocking content in the same way. Like for instance, when my kids sometimes watch an episode of, I just cut the cord with cable, so we don't have Comcast anymore. We're just doing satellite. I mean, like antenna. That's
a little extreme. You could just turn the TV off. You don't have to actually damage equipment.
For instance, sometimes my daughter would watch like Dora the Explorer or something like that, and she's watching it, and then
and Dora drops the F-bomb. Yeah, I saw that episode.
But it it ends, and then when it ends, it goes back to the on-demand channel where they're just previewing stuff, and if I'm not right on top of it, they're like showing, oh, here's this new horror movie, here's this new really crazy action movie where they're shooting each other in the head, and my daughter's sitting in the living room watching this stuff, and it's like your intentions were one thing, but because you didn't have the power to say I want to explicitly make sure that none of this type of content comes into the through this device, you don't have that power, then a lot of things leak in. So I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that I understand what you're saying. So I guess that to answer his question, I suppose that the answer why is this not happening is that there's probably just not great enough demand for it, because it doesn't seem like it would be terribly difficult.
You're right. There's
I mean, from a standpoint of technical feasibility, no roadblock that I can see. I think that Des are just choosing not to, and the reason I presume they're choosing not to is they don't feel that there's any real incentive to do so.
I think, though, in all honesty, I actually think that this is probably something we will start to see more of. I think it's practically no technical hurdle at this point, but it probably was to some degree maybe on the last generation of consoles, and more so the generation before that, so it's becoming less of a technical hurdle. So I think it's and very easy for them to do, and if there is enough of an audience for it, which I think that there potentially is, we might start to see it, because I mean, let's be honest, they give us more and more customization over every aspect of the game. I mean, we're starting to even hear about getting some graphical customization that is only available on PCs, possibly coming to the consoles this generation. Yeah. So I mean, to me, it comes down to a thing of just how easy is it to implement and cheap or whatever, versus how much are people wanting it. And I think that cost is going to get closer and closer to where it'll be a thing that people might start to offer. Right. Real quick though, I wanted to say I totally agree with you, Brent, on I do think that we have, especially in America, and I actually think this is one of those weird times where I feel like America is sort of behind the rest of the world in terms of sort of this prudishness towards sexuality and language and things like that. Personally, I believe that way, but I also do think that our country, we really should give the right to raise children back to the parents. Yeah. And if parents want control over things like this, I think, should at least be offered that as an option. I think that is, I don't think that it's a bad thing to have it. And then that way, Brent, you want to raise your daughter as you want to raise her, and so you're going to leave options like that off, or at least, or definitely show her how to turn them off. And, because I know
she'll figure that out on her own. If she takes after Daniel, her dad in any capacity, she got that figured out.
But Daniel, I totally respect you, and to be honest with you, I kind of think I would actually, in practice, maybe be somewhere in between the two of you. I would probably turn it off sooner in life than maybe Daniel would, but I probably would have it on at first.
I'm not trying to hide it from him. It's just that I have an 8-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. I think
it's not appropriate for them to be watching. And again, but
that's the thing. You feel it's not appropriate. I think both of us are saying that there's different
play
levels
Rise, Son of Rome in front of my kids. But if I'm playing something like Infamous, which is you're not really expecting it to be crazy, but then I haven't played through the latest Infamous, so I don't know, there might be some sex scene in it that is integral to the story.
Again, that's what I'm saying. You should have that choice
or something like that. And if I don't know what's going to be in a game like that where it's clear, I know it's going to be in Peggle, and I know it's going to be in Rise, Son of Rome, or Gears of War, but I don't know what's going to be in this huge middle ground of games.
That's where I think the one thing that is I do think that you have full control over customization in games to one degree, and that is whether you play them or not.
Right.
If they do rate the games, and if you see a mature or teen rated game and your kid is 8 years old, I would say you should err on the side of not getting it if that is what you're concerned about. Now, if you are less concerned about that, then you might be more likely to choose it. And that's the whole thing. Be a parent. If you're concerned, and if this, and we're going through a parent route, this may just be him personally, like his personal perspective may be, I don't want to hear that kind of stuff, and I totally respect that. Sure. But then you have that control, and that's whether to play it or not in the first place.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. I find it's really interesting to think about. I think about like my parents, like my mom. She's a big Quentin Tarantino fan, but she talks about, she's like, like I would love his movies so much if they didn't have so much crass humor, violence, and swearing. And I'm like, that's kind of what those movies are. Yeah. Like I'm not sure how much there's left to be had, but that's she does not enjoy that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting and difficult to kind of identify with. I find it kind of difficult to like step into the shoes and say, like, I really want to consume this piece of content, this piece of art, whatever, but I don't want the pieces that are kind of at its essence, like kind of what makes it distinct and what makes it what it is. But I don't want those things. But that is very odd to me.
In terms of Quentin Tarantino, that's applicable, but not all the time. Like a lot of times because of the popularity, sex and violence always sell, so everyone throws it into everything. So it's not that you're going for that, you know what I'm saying? So just because the creator of the content put it in there doesn't mean that they're of some high artistic mind that the movie couldn't, or the game couldn't be done without that.
But even that though is your interpretation of it. The same way that's Brent's interpretation.
You're second guessing the artist now. You're saying, right? I know better than you because you're applying commercialization and all these other attitudes to it that I don't agree with.
But that may or may not be why they put that in.
That's the thing. Like I don't think, if you're not the creator of it, then I don't think that you really have a right to fuck with it.
Well, I can understand that, true, but it's hard to know. Like if you're, the way Mass Effect 3 was overtly, violent and sexual in ways that Mass Effect 1 and 2 weren't, because it got commercialized by EA trying to reach a broader audience. I was with a franchise, and then you encounter something that's distinctly different. You're preaching to the choir
on that one, although for different reasons. But yeah, I understand your frustration in that regard.
So it's different. Sex and violence sell. They're going to throw it into everything they possibly can.
But sometimes it's meant to be there though, and you can't draw that. You can't just say every time it's in there it's not.
Of course,
that's what I'm saying though. But you kind of are though. You're saying that they put it in there for popularity.
There's like a threshold.
There is a threshold.
There's a difference between. I'm trying to think of like a good example. Oh, you know what? Beverly Hills Cop. Beverly Hills Cop is a good example, because we were talking about this not too long ago, and I was watching this. Beverly Hills Cop has got a couple of scenes that are basically in the movie. They're like, you know what? We need to like sexy this up a little bit. Let's throw in like a strip club scene or something like that.
And you could feel that it's like kind of just
and in any substantive way does not really contribute to the plot of that movie. Not that there's any like real substance to the plot of Beverly Hills fucking Cop, but just for the sake of the example.
But it doesn't feel out of place either, though.
But right? I don't know. I wouldn't say that it feels out of place, but it definitely feels kind of contrived, I suppose, as opposed to something like I'm trying to think of like Basic Instinct, where like the sexuality, the sensuality factor of that film is core to what the movie is.
And I have zero problem with that type of content. You know what I'm saying?
But I can kind of see that there's a difference between those.
Right. Exactly.
So I kind of see the thing it comes down to is your personal take on it. And the thing is, I think it is an interesting question of whether you should have any control over whether you see that or not.
And ultimately, I have to say that I think, and I'll make the distinction. I think that like if the developers were to like make tools like this available to people, especially if it was like a community driven thing where they're like, okay, you know what, like if you want to, like, I don't know, mute certain words or like black out the screen during certain moments in order to make this more tenable either for yourself or possibly your children or whatever, we're going to provide you some tools, and the community can put together I don't know, some kind of like patch, some kind of plug-in, people go through, they're like, okay, mute this word right here, block this scene right here. If they do that and they can distribute it freely and everything, and it's something that that the developers are chill with and that people want to partake in, I think that's like totally cool.
Yeah, it's a different
ironically,
form of
the first thing they will do with those tools is make nude patches for all
that's
the female
exactly
characters in the
that's
game.
exactly
so,
right, because Rule
anyway,
34, Rule 34 conquers all.
Good question, Curtis. I think it's a great question to send our way, and hopefully got some interesting insight from us off of it. If you've got any more questions, of course, send them to our Twitter, and it's at EpicBattleX, and always check back with us on YouTube at /EpicBattleX, and check back with us tomorrow. It's gonna be middle of the week. Somebody will probably make a hump day joke, or Wednesday it means something in some language that joke. Yeah,
that's right.
But
some mythological reference. Maybe
hopefully we'll talk about entertaining stuff as well.
A question from a person with an unusual name.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, check us out tomorrow. Peace.